Somewhere in the dark ocean, a creature bigger than a school bus is floating completely still, almost dead, on purpose, hanging motionless in open water like it has given up entirely. Its head alone weighs as much as a car, packed with a strange oil scientists still don't fully understand. Inside its body are scars from fights nobody has ever filmed. Inside its stomach, things that should never be there. We're talking exploding carcasses, sonic weapons made of sound, and a smell so disgusting it's somehow turned into one of the most expensive substances on Earth. If you're new here, hit subscribe, because it only gets weirder from this point on. The sperm whale is not what you think it is. Let's go inside. Picture a school bus. Now, picture that school bus attached to the front of an animal swimming through pitch black water. That is basically what a sperm whale's head looks like. It takes up a third of its entire body. Nothing else in the ocean is built like this. Inside that giant head is not brain. It is not bone. It is oil. Gallons and gallons of a strange, waxy liquid called spermaceti, sitting in a huge tank above the whale's actual skull. Early sailors thought it looked like something else entirely, which is actually where the whale got its name. They had no idea what it really was. For centuries, humans hunted these animals just to drain that oil out. It burned clean and bright, so it ended up in lamps, in candles, in machines all over the world. An entire industry was built around cutting into that head and scooping out what was inside. But here is the strange part. Even with all that hunting, even with all that oil harvested, scientists are still not 100% sure why the whale needs so much of it. It is not just fat storage. It is not just for floating. Something about that oil helps the whale survive in a way we are still piecing together. Think about carrying a 500-pound tank of liquid on the front of your face, your entire life, using it every single day just to stay alive. That is this animal's normal, and the size is not the only strange thing. The shape matters too. That giant block head is not round like you would expect. It is almost rectangular, flat on the front, like a wall built for smashing through water instead of sliding through it. Some scientists believe males slam these heads together during fights, using that oil tank like a built-in cushion, a shock absorber for battles we almost never get to see. Imagine two school buses ramming into each other, over and over, in complete darkness, a mile under the surface. Nobody can say that for certain, but the scars on some male whales line up with it perfectly. Deep dents, cracked skull bone underneath, healed over years later. Whatever happens down there, it leaves a mark that lasts a lifetime. Whalers in the 1800s noticed this too. Old logbooks describe cutting open a whale's head and finding the bone underneath crushed and rebuilt, again and again, like a boxer's knuckles after years in the ring. Nobody wrote it down as a mystery back then. They just wanted the oil. It took modern scientists, more than a century later, to look at those same skulls and ask the obvious question: what kind of animal survives hits like that? For comparison, a car crash at 30 miles an hour can total the vehicle and seriously hurt the people inside. A sperm whale slamming its head into another sperm whale is carrying way more weight at real speed through water that resists movement far more than air does. And it walks away, swims away, still hunting, still diving, like nothing happened. That 500-pound oil tank might be the only reason its brain does not get destroyed on impact. So this animal is not just big, it is built like a weapon, carrying a tank of mystery oil that helped build human civilization and that we still do not fully understand. And that oil is not even the strangest thing about this head, because it is not there to help the whale smell or breathe or think. It has a completely different job, one that turns this whale into something closer to a living machine than anything else alive in the ocean. A sperm whale can make the loudest sound of any living animal on Earth, louder than a lion's roar, louder than a jet taking off, louder than almost anything humans have ever built. Scientists have measured single clicks from these whales at 230 decibels underwater, That number does not mean much on its own. So, picture this instead. A jet engine, heard from right next to the runway, hits around 140 decibels in air. A gunshot fired next to your ear is close to 165. Convert the whale's underwater click into what it would feel like in air, and you land somewhere around 170 to 180 decibels. That is standing in front of a cannon the moment it fires, and the whale does this constantly, every single dive, just to see in the dark. Here is the part that should freak you out a little. Divers who have been near sperm whales while they are clicking describe feeling it, not hearing it, feeling it. A pressure wave moving straight through their chest, like a static shock from the inside. Water carries sound far more violently than air does, so a blast that would just be loud above the surface becomes something you can physically feel below it. Some researchers believe that at close range, a full power click could genuinely injure smaller animals nearby, rattle organs, disorient anything caught directly in front of that beam of sound. And these clicks do not just stay close to the whale, they travel. Scientists using underwater microphones, called hydrophones, have picked up sperm whale clicks from over 10 miles away, sometimes much farther depending on the water. That means an entire ocean basin can carry the sound of one whale hunting in the dark, heard by researchers sitting on a boat, or another whale, miles from where it started. Some of these hydrophones sit anchored to the sea floor for months at a time, silently recording. When scientists pull the data later, they find click patterns stacked on top of each other, coming from different directions, at different depths, an entire hidden conversation, happening constantly, that nobody on the surface ever hears. So, why is the whale making this noise in the first place? It is building a picture of everything around it, using sound the same way a flashlight uses light. In water this dark, eyes are almost useless past a certain depth. Sunlight cannot reach that far down, so the whale sends out a click, waits for it to bounce off something solid, a rock, a fish, a giant squid, and reads the echo that comes back. Do this fast enough, over and over, and you get a full three-dimensional map of your surroundings, built entirely out of sound. It is the same basic idea as a submarine's sonar system, except the whale had this technology millions of years before humans figured out how to build it ourselves. But a flashlight needs a bulb, a sonar system needs a transmitter. So where exactly does a 230 decibel blast of sound come from? Inside a living animal, with no metal parts and no electricity. The answer is sitting right inside that giant oil-filled head from the last chapter. That strange waxy liquid is not just padding. It is not just a cushion for head-to-head fights. It turns out that oil has a second job, a job that has almost nothing to do with smell and everything to do with turning this whale's entire face into a machine built for aiming sound like a weapon. Here is something strange. Despite having the biggest nose organ of any animal on the planet, a sperm whale barely has a sense of smell at all. That giant structure filling a third of its head is not built to smell the ocean around it. It has a completely different purpose, and it turns the whale's whole face into a living machine for controlling sound. Think of it like the inside of a camera lens, except instead of bending light, it bends sound. Deep inside that head sits a smaller chamber scientists nicknamed the monkey lips. When the whale forces air past them, they slap together and create the click. That click then shoots backward through the giant oil-filled tank, straight toward a wall of dense connective tissue at the back of the skull. That wall works like a mirror, bouncing the sound forward again. Now the click passes back through a second, smaller pocket of oil near the front, one with a different thickness and shape than the first. This second pocket focuses the sound into a tight, narrow beam, the same way a lens focuses scattered light into a single point. By the time that click actually leaves the whale's head, it is not just loud anymore, it is aimed. A concentrated beam of sound, pointed exactly where the whale wants to look, built out of oil, air pockets, and tissue instead of glass and metal. Humans did not figure out how to build focused sonar until the 20th century. This animal has been doing it since long before humans existed at all. And here is the twist. Because that entire head is dedicated to producing and aiming sound, there was barely any room left over for a working nose. The nostrils on a sperm whale are not even where you would expect. They sit off to one side, near the front left of the head, not lined up in the center like most animals. One of them is barely functional at all. It exists mostly to move air through the sound system, not to smell anything. So an animal famous for having the biggest nose in the ocean can barely smell its own dinner. It does not need to. When your entire face can build a three-dimensional map of pitch black water using sound alone, smell becomes almost pointless. Evolution stripped it away because there was no reason to keep it. This is also why sperm whales are almost never seen actively using their eyes to hunt. Vision matters near the surface, in daylight, but past a certain depth, it becomes close to useless. The whale is not swimming blind down there. It is swimming with a built-in sonar system so precise, it can tell the difference between a rock and a squid from dozens of feet away, in complete darkness, using nothing but returning clicks. But building and firing that system all day, every day, takes an enormous amount of energy, and an animal burning that much energy needs real rest eventually. So what does resting even look like for a creature this size, built entirely around sound? The answer is stranger than you would expect, and it involves the whale doing something that, from a distance, looks less like sleeping and more like dying. Picture this. You are on a boat, gliding quietly across calm ocean water when your light catches something below the surface. A row of massive shapes, hanging straight up and down in the water, completely motionless, just floating there, vertical, like a group of statues someone dropped into the sea. That is a pod of sperm whales, asleep. For a long time, scientists were not even sure whales slept the way other animals do. Some species seem to rest one half of their brain at a time, keeping the other half awake just enough to breathe and stay alert. But sperm whales appear to do something closer to true, full sleep, and it looks nothing like what you would expect. Researchers using underwater cameras eventually caught it happening. Groups of whales, drifting near the surface, heads pointed down, bodies perfectly still, for roughly 10 to 15 minutes at a stretch. No clicking, no sound at all, just silence and stillness, floating in open water with nothing below them but darkness for thousands of feet. Here is the unsettling part. During this stretch, the whales do not seem to notice much of anything happening around them. Boats have drifted close enough to bump gently into sleeping whales without them reacting right away. For an animal that spends its entire life reading the ocean through sound, going fully silent and fully still is about as vulnerable as it gets. Imagine being the fastest, most alert person in a room and then closing your eyes completely in the middle of open water, trusting that nothing bigger is coming for you. For years, this behavior was basically a rumor among sailors and divers, a strange story nobody could really prove. It took a research team tagging whales with small suction cup cameras and motion sensors to finally verify it was real. The tags recorded almost no movement at all for stretches of 10 to 15 minutes, over and over, always near the surface, always in that same head-down position. Once researchers matched that data with actual footage of the drifting, silent whales, the mystery had an answer. This was full sleep, real and complete, just in a shape nobody had expected from an animal this size. Sperm whales do not have many natural predators as adults, which might be exactly why they can afford to sleep like this. A pack of orcas will occasionally test a pod, but a full-grown adult is usually too big and too strong to be worth the risk. Still, floating motionless and unresponsive, even for 15 minutes, is a serious gamble for any wild animal. And they do not sleep alone. Pods often rest together in tight clusters, sometimes touching, almost like a group of people huddled together for safety. Some scientists think this clustering behavior might work the same way herd animals bunch up on land, more eyes and bodies packed together, even if none of those eyes are actually open and watching. The stranger question is what happens to the calves during all of this. A newborn sperm whale cannot hold its breath anywhere near as long as an adult can. It cannot sink motionless for 15 minutes the way its mother does. So while the rest of the pod goes still and silent, something else has to happen for the smallest member of the group. Something that turns out to be one of the more dangerous parts of a baby whale's entire first year of life. A newborn sperm whale is already massive by human standards, roughly the size of a small car the moment it is born. But compared to the adults around it, it is helpless in one very specific way. It cannot dive. Not deep dives. Anyway, an adult sperm whale can hold its breath for over an hour and drop thousands of feet into freezing black water to hunt. A calf's body simply is not ready for that yet. Its lungs, its blood, its entire oxygen system needs years to develop the way an adult's has. So while the rest of the pod disappears downward to feed, the calf is left behind at the surface, alone in open ocean, unable to follow. This is exactly the moment predators would want. Orcas hunting in packs specifically target calves separated from a pod, because a lone baby whale near the surface is far easier to attack than a full-grown adult protected by a group. In open water, with no reef to hide in and no cave to disappear into, a calf sitting alone at the surface is about as exposed as prey gets. So, sperm whale pods solve this with something scientists call babysitting. While a mother dives deep to hunt, another adult or older juvenile stays behind at the surface with her calf. Sometimes it is an aunt, sometimes another female entirely unrelated by blood. This babysitter keeps watch, sometimes even nursing a calf that is not her own if the mother is taking too long to return from the depths. Think about that for a second. An adult whale giving up part of her own feeding time, staying near the surface, protecting a baby that belongs to someone else, purely because the group survives better this way. This is not something scientists expected to find in an animal often described as a solitary, silent hunter. Without this system, calves would be left exposed every single time the pod needed to feed. With it, there is almost always another set of eyes and ears near the surface, using those same powerful clicks to listen for danger while the rest of the group is gone. It is one of the clearest signs that sperm whales are not just big, dangerous animals swimming alone through the ocean. They are running something closer to a society. Rules, roles, shared responsibility for keeping the smallest members alive. Researchers listening with hydrophones have picked up something else strange during these separations. Calves and babysitters seem to trade specific click patterns back and forth, almost like a check-in call. Some scientists believe these patterns work a little like a name, a specific sound tied to a specific individual, repeated so a calf can recognize exactly who is near it even without seeing them. In water this dark, a familiar sound might be the only thing telling a baby whale it is safe. The diving pattern itself is timed too. Mothers do not simply vanish for as long as they want. Dives tend to follow a rhythm, down for around 45 minutes, back up to check on the calf, then back down again. Miss that rhythm, drift too far, or lose track of the group entirely, and a calf's odds of survival drop fast. But being small and slow to develop creates other problems too, ones that follow a calf long after it learns to dive on its own. Problems buried inside its gut, connected directly to the same prey its entire family has hunted for millions of years. Prey with a hard, sharp part that the whale's body was never built to fully break down. Sperm whales eat squid, thousands of pounds of it, over and over, for their entire lives. But squid have one part a whale's body cannot break down, a hard, curved beak sitting right where the tentacles meet the body. It is sharp, it is tough, and swallowing it whole over and over creates a problem that builds up quietly inside the whale for years. Normally, the whale just throws these beaks back up before they cause damage. Simple enough. But sometimes, some of them slip past the stomach and into the intestine instead, where vomiting them out is no longer an option. This is where things get strange. Instead of letting these sharp beaks tear through delicate tissue on their way out, the whale's intestine starts producing a thick, waxy substance that wraps around them, layer after layer, the same way a pearl slowly forms around a grain of sand inside an oyster. Over months, sometimes years, this coating builds into a solid mass, sitting inside the whale, growing heavier with every beak it traps. Eventually, this mass leaves the whale's body, sometimes through normal waste. In rare, more serious cases, a mass has grown so large it blocked the whale's intestine entirely, which can become fatal. Once it is out, this strange lump does not sink. It floats, drifting on the surface of the ocean for months or even years, carried by currents across entire oceans, slowly getting cooked by salt water and sunlight the whole time. For most of human history, nobody had any idea where this stuff actually came from. People found it washed up on beaches around the world and had no explanation for it at all. Some guessed it was a strange kind of sea foam. Others thought it was fossilized bird droppings from a mysterious island. One old guess even claimed it was hardened dragon spit, which honestly says a lot about how confusing this substance was before science caught up. It took whalers actually cutting open sperm whale carcasses to finally connect the dots. Inside some of these animals, especially ones that had died from a blocked gut, sat the exact same waxy mass people had been finding on beaches for centuries. The mystery had an answer, and it was not romantic at all. Scientists studying old whaling records noticed something else too. Between the 1940s and the 1970s, when hundreds of sperm whales were being killed every single year for their oil, only a tiny handful of them ever produced this mass. Most whales simply vomit up squid beaks without any issue at all. Only a small number end up with a blockage severe enough to create one of these masses in the first place, which means this entire strange process, one that eventually creates something incredibly valuable, only happens to a small fraction of these animals. This substance was quite literally a whale's blocked digestive waste, hardened around swallowed squid parts it could not process. A byproduct of survival, an animal's body doing whatever it took to protect itself from being torn apart from the inside by its own dinner. But here is where the story flips completely, because what starts out as one of the most disgusting things imaginable eventually transforms into something people around the world have paid absolutely staggering amounts of money for. The substance is called ambergris, and when it first leaves a whale's body, it smells absolutely disgusting. There is no nice way to describe it. Freshly produced ambergris has a strong, unmistakable fecal smell, which honestly makes sense once you remember exactly where it came from. If you found a fresh piece washed up on a beach the day it arrived, you would probably assume something nearby had died, or worse, and you would want nothing to do with it. But leave that same lump floating in the ocean for months, sometimes years, and something bizarre starts happening to it. Constant exposure to salt water, sunlight, and oxygen slowly breaks down the compounds inside the mass. The horrible, sharp smell fades. In its place, a completely different scent begins to develop, one people have struggled to fully describe for centuries. Some compare it to tobacco. Others say sandalwood, or old churchwood, or fresh sea air after a storm. One expert who spent decades studying the substance described it as musky, earthy, and strangely sweet all at once, somewhere between an ocean breeze and a fine cigar. Think about that transformation for a second. The exact same object, made of the exact same material, going from something you would hold your nose around to something perfume makers have paid enormous amounts of money to get their hands on. Nothing was added, nothing was removed. Time and salt water did the entire job. This aging process cannot be rushed either. A fresh lump is basically worthless to the perfume industry. It has to drift, exposed to the elements, for a long stretch of time before that transformation actually happens. Nobody can dump a bucket of chemicals on it and speed things up. The ocean does this at its own pace, and there is no shortcut around it. perfume makers eventually figured out that ambergris does something almost no synthetic ingredient can fully replace. It does not just add its own scent to a perfume. It grabs onto other scents around it and makes them last far longer on skin than they normally would, working almost like a natural glue that traps fragrance in place. For hundreds of years, this made ambergris one of the most valuable natural materials perfume makers could find, right alongside gold and rare spices in terms of how badly people wanted it. Telling real ambergris, apart from a random lump of beach debris, is not simple either. Genuine pieces are lightweight for their size, waxy to the touch, and often still have tiny undigested squid beaks trapped inside them like fossils in a rock. Experts sometimes heat a small piece with a needle, checking how it melts and what kind of smoke it gives off, since fake versions and look-alike materials tend to react completely differently. In recent years, scientists have gone even further, running DNA tests on beach finds to prove, without any doubt, that the sample actually came from a sperm whale and not some other source entirely. So somewhere out there, right now, there could be a piece of aging whale waste drifting across an ocean current, slowly turning from something repulsive into something people are actively searching beaches for. And when someone actually finds a large enough piece, the amount of money involved gets genuinely hard to believe. In 2016, a couple walking along a beach in the United Kingdom noticed a strange, waxy rock sitting in the sand. It weighed a little over 3 pounds, roughly the same as a small bag of flour. It did not look like much of anything special. That lump turned out to be ambergris, and it was valued at up to $70,000. One walk on the beach. One weird-looking rock most people would have kicked aside without a second glance. And it was worth more than a lot of people make in an entire year of work. That is not even close to the biggest find on record. In Oman, 2 men once discovered a much larger chunk of ambergris, weighing around 13 kilograms, close to 30 pounds. A single trader offered them over $600,000 for it on the spot. They turned the offer down, hoping to find an even better deal somewhere else. Read that again. 2 guys found a lump of aged whale digestive waste on a beach, and someone was ready to hand over enough money to buy a house for it, immediately, in cash. This is why people around the world, especially along coastlines where sperm whales are known to pass through, actually go searching for this stuff on purpose. Beaches in places like New Zealand, the Maldives, and parts of the Arabian coast have developed something close to a treasure hunting culture around it. Locals know exactly what a genuine piece looks and feels like, and a good storm followed by the right tide can wash a life-changing find directly onto the sand. Of course, most people searching beaches never find anything close to this valuable. Real ambergris is genuinely rare, and most of what people find turns out to be ordinary debris, tar, or hardened fat that only looks similar at first glance. But the fact that it is even possible that an actual person can stumble onto a waxy rock worth hundreds of thousands of dollars just by walking along the right stretch of sand at the right time is exactly why the search has never stopped. Modern perfume brands still use tiny, heavily diluted amounts of real ambergris in some of their most expensive fragrances, alongside lab-made substitutes that try to copy the same effect for far less money. But collectors and certain luxury brands still pay a serious premium for the real thing, sourced naturally, the same way it has always been found. So next time someone brings up whale poop as a joke, remember this. It might be one of the only bodily waste products on the entire planet that people are actively willing to pay life-changing amounts of money for. There is a strange side effect to all of this too. Because ambergris is so valuable, sperm whales were sometimes specifically hunted for it in the past, on top of being hunted for their oil. An animal builds this substance as a defense against its own food, and for a long stretch of human history, that same defense became one more reason people went looking for the whale itself. But ambergris only forms because of what a sperm whale swallows in the first place. And to reach that food, this whale has to do something almost nothing else on the planet is built to survive. To catch the squid that eventually leads to ambergris, a sperm whale has to go somewhere almost nothing else on the planet can follow. Straight down, past the point where sunlight even exists, into water so deep it would crush most machines humans have ever built. Researchers tracking sperm whales with data tags have recorded regular hunting dives reaching depths between 1,000 and 2,600 feet, roughly the height of 2 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other, straight down into freezing black water. Some recorded dives have gone even deeper than that, past 7,000 feet in extreme cases, more than a mile beneath the surface. For comparison, most military submarines are built to operate at depths far shallower than that. Push a submarine hull too far past its limit, and the surrounding water pressure can crack it open like a soda can. A sperm whale does this willingly, on its own power, using nothing but muscle, blood, and lungs, then swims back up afterward like it was nothing. And it is not a quick trip either. A single dive can last well over an hour, the whale holding its breath the entire time while hunting in complete darkness for prey that is actively trying not to be found. Think about swimming down the length of a football field, except stacked more than 20 times over, in freezing water, with no light at all, no air, and pressure strong enough to crush a metal container. Now do it while also hunting something that can fight back. For a long time, nobody could actually prove how deep these dives really went. Scientists mostly guessed based on how long a whale stayed underwater. That changed once researchers started attaching small suction cup tags directly onto a whale's back, right before it dove, then retrieving the tag later to download exact depth and time data. Some of the clearest proof of just how deep these whales travel came from an unexpected source entirely. Undersea communication cables, laid across the ocean floor to carry telephone and internet signals, have occasionally been found damaged by something large enough to get tangled in them, more than 3,000 feet down. When engineers investigated, the evidence pointed straight back to sperm whales, casually operating in a part of the ocean humans only visit using expensive, specially built equipment. At those depths, the water pressure pushing in on the whale's body is immense, hundreds of times stronger than what you feel standing on solid ground. Any air pocket inside a normal body would get crushed flat almost instantly at those depths. So how does an air-breathing mammal, something that needs to breathe the exact same way you do, survive conditions that would destroy a machine built from steel? The answer is not that the whale resists the pressure. The answer is that its body does something that sounds almost impossible. It lets the pressure win, on purpose, in a very specific and controlled way, collapsing parts of itself completely rather than fighting a battle. It could never actually win against an entire ocean pressing down from above. This is not something the whale is doing by accident either. It is a built-in survival response, triggered automatically the moment the dive begins, almost like a switch flipping deep inside its body. And the part of the body that flips first is one you would probably assume needs to stay rigid no matter what. Your rib cage exists to protect the soft, fragile organs sitting behind it. Rigid, solid, something you would never want to actually cave in. But deep inside a diving sperm whale, that is exactly what happens on purpose, every single time it dives deep enough. A sperm whale's rib cage is not fused solid the way a lot of mammal skeletons are. Several of the ribs connect to the spine and to each other through flexible cartilage instead of rigid bone. This means the whole structure can actually flex and fold inward under enough outside pressure, instead of cracking or shattering the way a stiffer skeleton would. As the whale dives deeper, water pressure pushes in from every direction at once. Rather than resisting that pressure and risking serious injury, the rib cage gives way, collapsing inward in a controlled, survivable way. The lungs collapse right along with it, air getting squeezed out of them and pushed into other parts of the respiratory system built specifically to handle it. This sounds terrifying, and in a way, it should. Imagine your own chest folding inward under pressure, needing that exact collapse to actually survive. For the whale, this collapse is the entire strategy, built directly into its skeleton on purpose. Here is why it actually helps. Gases like nitrogen only become dangerous when they get forced into the bloodstream under high pressure, then expand rapidly as an animal rises back toward the surface too quickly. This is the same basic danger that gives human scuba divers something called decompression sickness, sometimes known as the bends, a condition that can seriously injure or even kill a diver who surfaces too fast. By collapsing its lungs and pushing air out of the exchange surfaces before nitrogen has a chance to flood into the blood, the whale largely sidesteps this entire danger. Less air trapped under pressure means less gas dissolving into its system in the first place. It is not avoiding the problem through willpower. It is avoiding it through a physical structure built specifically to give way instead of fight back. Human divers have to learn all of this the hard way, through decades of trial, injury, and medical research, slow ascents, safety stops on the way back up, strict limits on how deep a diver can safely go and how quickly they are allowed to return. A sperm whale needs none of that training. This entire safety system is already built directly into its skeleton, running automatically every single dive without the whale ever having to think about it once. Once the whale starts heading back toward the surface, the pressure around it drops, and that same rib cage and those same lungs slowly reopen and reinflate, almost like a pool float being pumped back up after being crushed flat in someone's bag. By the time the whale breaks the surface for air, everything has returned to its normal shape, ready to be crushed all over again on the very next dive. But a flexible rib cage alone is not enough to survive an hour underwater on a single breath. Something else has to happen too. Something involving the one organ in the whale's body that absolutely cannot afford to run out of oxygen, even for a second. Every cell in your body needs a steady supply of oxygen to survive, and your heart's entire job is pumping blood around fast enough to deliver it everywhere at once. Slow that pump down too much, and organs start shutting off one by one. A sperm whale does the opposite of what you would expect. The deeper it dives, the slower its heart actually beats. This is called bradycardia, and it is one of the strangest survival tools in the entire animal kingdom. At the surface, a sperm whale's heart beats at a fairly normal rate for an animal this size. But the instant it commits to a deep dive, that heart rate drops dramatically, sometimes to a fraction of its normal speed, conserving oxygen instead of burning through it, delivering blood everywhere at once. Here is the genius part. The whale's body does not treat every organ equally during this slowdown. Blood flow gets redirected away from areas that can survive without it temporarily, like muscles in the arms and legs of a human during extreme cold, and concentrated instead toward the organs that absolutely cannot go without oxygen for long: the brain, the heart itself. A handful of critical systems get to keep functioning at full strength, while everything else runs on a strict oxygen budget until the dive is over. Think of it like a phone switching into low power mode the second the battery gets low. Non-essential apps get shut down automatically, screen brightness drops, but the core system, the part that actually keeps the phone working at all, stays protected and running. A sperm whale's body does something remarkably similar, except the stakes are not a dead phone battery. The stakes are the whale's actual life. This slowdown is not something the whale consciously controls either, the same way you cannot consciously decide to lower your own heart rate on demand. It is an automatic reflex, wired directly into the whale's nervous system, triggered the moment a deep dive begins. Researchers have measured similar reflexes on a much smaller scale in humans too. Splash cold water on someone's face and hold their breath, and their heart rate will dip slightly, a leftover survival trick from somewhere deep in our shared evolutionary past. In a sperm whale, that same basic reflex got scaled up and refined over millions of years into something powerful enough to support an entire hour underwater at bone-crushing depth. Instead of a few extra seconds holding your breath in a swimming pool, combine this with extra oxygen carrying proteins packed into the whale's blood and muscle tissue, far higher concentrations than a human body carries, and you get an animal capable of running on a single breath for well over an hour at depths that would leave most air-breathing animals unconscious within minutes. All of this, the collapsing rib cage, the redirected blood flow, the heart nearly grinding to a stop, exists purely so the whale can survive long enough in the crushing dark to hunt down its prey. And down there, waiting in that darkness, is something that does not go down without a serious fight. A sperm whale reaching the bottom of a dive is not swimming into empty, quiet water. It is swimming straight into the hunting ground of something else entirely. An animal most people only picture in monster movies, but one that is genuinely real, genuinely massive, and genuinely capable of putting up a fight. The giant squid. For most of human history, this animal existed almost entirely as legend. Sailors told stories of enormous sea monsters with arms strong enough to pull a ship under, and for centuries, scientists mostly dismissed these stories as exaggeration, myths built up from fear and dark water. There was a real reason nobody could prove it either way. Giant squid live so deep, in such total darkness, that catching a clear look at one alive was close to impossible. It took modern deep-sea cameras, lowered on cables, thousands of feet down, to finally capture the first verified footage of a live giant squid in its own environment. That single piece of footage changed everything, because it proved the old sailor stories were not just exaggeration after all. Giant squid really can reach lengths of over 30 feet, arms included, roughly the length of a school bus, stretched out end to end. Even bigger versions may exist too. Scientists have described a related animal, the colossal squid, using remains pulled from sperm whale stomachs, estimating it could grow even heavier than the giant squid, with hooks on its arms instead of just suction discs. Almost everything known about this creature comes second-hand, pieced together from parts that survived a sperm whale's stomach acid long enough to be studied. Since a living adult has almost never been directly observed at all, and a sperm whale hunts this animal on purpose, deliberately, as one of its primary sources of food. Think about that matchup for a second. A predator the size of a bus, swimming through water so dark neither animal can see more than a few feet ahead, using nothing but sound and touch to locate the other. One side has raw size, crushing bite force, and one of the loudest sonar systems on the planet. The other side has speed, flexibility, and 8 powerful arms lined with hundreds of sharp suction discs, each one edged with a ring of tiny teeth strong enough to tear flesh. This is not a one-sided hunt where the whale simply swallows an easy meal. Giant squid do not go down without resistance. And the evidence of exactly how hard they fight back is written directly onto the skin of nearly every adult sperm whale that has ever hunted one. Scientists studying whale carcasses and whales caught during the whaling era kept noticing the same strange pattern showing up again and again. Rows of circular scars scattered across the head and body, sometimes dozens of them on a single animal. At first glance, they almost look like a disease or a strange skin condition. They are neither. They are the leftover signature of an actual fight, one that happened somewhere in the pitch-black depths of the ocean between two of the most powerful predators alive. Look closely at the skin of an adult sperm whale, especially around the head and jaw, and you will almost always find them. Round, pale scars, scattered across the body like some kind of strange pattern, each one slightly different in size but unmistakably similar in shape. These are sucker scars, left behind by a giant squid's arms during a fight for survival. A giant squid's arms are lined with rows of powerful circular suction discs, and around the rim of each one sits a ring of small, sharp teeth like hooks. When those arms wrap around a whale's body during an attack, or during the whale's own attempt to grab and kill the squid, those hooked rings dig into the skin and hold on with serious force. Whales are strong, and their skin is thick, but a giant squid fighting for its life is not going to let go without doing damage first. Every time those suction discs grip and pull against a whale's flesh, they leave a mark, a permanent scar that never fully fades. sitting there for the rest of the whale's life as physical proof that this particular fight actually happened. Scientists studying stranded and hunted whales have counted these scars on individual animals, sometimes finding hundreds of them scattered across a single body, concentrated most heavily around the head, jaw, and the front section closest to where the whale's mouth actually makes contact during a kill. The pattern makes sense once you picture the fight itself. A squid's arms are not going for the whale's tail or its back fin. They are wrapping around whatever part of the whale is closest to them in the final desperate seconds, which usually means the exact area where the whale is trying to close its jaw around them. The oldest, most experienced whales tend to carry the most scars. Some individuals are covered in them, head to body, decades worth of encounters layered on top of each other, like some kind of grim scrapbook written directly onto their skin. Younger whales usually carry far fewer, either because they have not hunted long enough yet, or because they have not survived enough encounters yet to build up the same collection. Here is something that should genuinely unsettle you. These scars are not from one single, unusually aggressive squid. They are typical, expected. Almost every adult male sperm whale, examined by scientists, carries some version of this pattern somewhere on its body. This is not a rare injury from one freak encounter. This is essentially an occupational hazard, baked directly into what it means to be a sperm whale hunting at that depth. Think about a job where getting seriously injured is close to guaranteed, over and over, for your entire working life, and where you are expected to just keep going back for more anyway because it is literally how you get food. That is every deep dive a sperm whale makes once it is old enough to start hunting squid seriously. And some of these scars are not small either. Some of them are large enough that measuring just one gives you a genuinely disturbing idea of exactly what kind of animal put it there in the first place. Most of the sucker scars found on a sperm whale's skin are fairly small, a few inches across at most, roughly the size of a coffee mug or a fist. That alone is enough to picture the strength involved in a squid fight. But some scars discovered on certain whales are nowhere near that small. Researchers examining a handful of older, heavily marked whales have documented individual sucker scars measuring several inches across, some approaching the width of an actual dinner plate. A single suction mark, left by a single arm, wide enough to nearly cover your entire hand. Now stop and do the math on that for a second. If one individual sucker disc left a mark that large, think about the actual size of the arm it was attached to, and the size of the full animal that arm belonged to. Suction discs do not scale up randomly. They match the size of the creature carrying them. A mark that wide points toward a squid substantially larger than the already massive giant squid, scientists have directly measured and studied. This is part of why some researchers believe certain scars might actually come from something even bigger than a giant squid. The colossal squid, the one scientists have mostly pieced together from stomach remains and a handful of rare specimens, is believed to grow heavier than a giant squid, with sharp rotating hooks lining parts of its arms instead of just smooth suction rings. A fight with an animal like that would leave a very different, very specific kind of mark behind, one that some of these larger scars appear to match. Nobody has directly proven which exact species left every single scar ever found on a sperm whale. Identifying an attacker purely from the shape of a healed wound is genuinely difficult work, closer to forensic science than simple observation. Skin stretches and scars can shift shape slightly as an animal continues to grow for years afterward, which makes pinning down an exact measurement from the original arm even trickier. But the size of some of these marks alone tells you everything you actually need to know about the scale of what happens during these encounters. Whaling crews from centuries ago noticed these giant marks too, long before anyone understood what could have possibly caused them. Old accounts describe sailors finding whale skin covered in strange round wounds and simply assuming the animal had survived some kind of disease. It took modern marine biology and a much better understanding of deep-sea squid to finally connect those old descriptions to an actual predator large enough to explain them. Picture something strong enough to grip and pull on an animal that can survive pressure capable of crushing a submarine, strong enough to leave a permanent mark the size of a dinner plate, on skin thick enough to shrug off most other threats in the ocean. Whatever left that mark was not a small, easy meal. It was a genuine predator, fighting back with everything it had, in total darkness, with nobody around to witness exactly how the fight actually played out. And that last part is precisely the problem, because as detailed and dramatic as these scars are, they only tell scientists what happened after the fact. They cannot show the actual moment itself. Every scar, every mark, every piece of evidence scientists have gathered about sperm whales fighting giant squid comes from after the battle is already over. Nobody, not one person, has ever captured actual footage of a full sperm whale versus giant squid fight, from start to finish, happening in real time. Think about how strange that is. This is one of the most dramatic predator versus predator encounters that exists anywhere on the planet, and it has been playing out for millions of years, completely unrecorded. It is not that people have not tried. Deep-sea researchers have spent enormous amounts of money and years of effort attempting to capture this exact moment on camera. Special low-light cameras have been lowered thousands of feet down. Tags with tiny built-in video recorders have been attached directly to diving whales, hoping to catch a hunt from the whale's own point of view. These efforts have gotten closer than ever before. Researchers have captured brief video of a sperm whale approaching a squid, and separate footage of a live giant squid swimming in its natural deep-sea habitat. But an actual full confrontation, teeth against tentacles, captured start to finish on camera, has never been recorded by anyone. Here is why this is so difficult. The fight, if it happens the way scientists believe it does, takes place somewhere between 500 and over 3,000 feet down, in complete darkness, where camera light itself can spook or alter the behavior of animals that evolved for millions of years without ever encountering artificial light at all. Bring a bright camera light into that environment, and you might be changing the exact behavior you are trying to observe. There is also the simple issue of timing and luck. The ocean is enormous. A camera has to be in the exact right place, at the exact right depth, at the exact right moment a hunt happens to occur, out of an animal's entire lifetime of dives. The odds of that lining up, even with the best equipment available, remain incredibly low. Some research teams have tried a different approach entirely, attaching small cameras directly onto the squid instead of the whale, hoping to record an attack from the prey's point of view if one ever happened to occur during the recording window. So far, nobody has gotten fully lucky. Batteries run out, tags fall off. The ocean simply does not cooperate on command, no matter how much planning goes into an expedition. So, for now, everything scientists actually know about how this fight unfolds comes from indirect evidence. Scars on skin, squid beaks found in stomachs, sound recordings of a whale's clicking pattern suddenly speeding up right before it goes quiet, which some researchers interpret as the final, active moment of a hunt. Piecing together a full picture this way is slow, painstaking work, closer to assembling a puzzle from scattered fragments than watching a finished picture unfold in real time. Every scar adds one more data point. Every recovered beak adds another. Every recorded click pattern adds a small piece of timing information. None of it, on its own, tells the complete story. But stacked together across thousands of examined whales, a rough outline of what probably happens down there has slowly started to take shape. And that clicking pattern brings up one of the strangest, most debated ideas about how sperm whales might actually be finishing these fights in the first place. Because some scientists do not think teeth are the only weapon involved at all. Back in the 1980s, a biologist named Kenneth Norris noticed something odd while studying sperm whale stomach contents. Squid pulled from these stomachs often showed no bite marks, no visible struggle damage at all, just intact bodies, as if something had simply switched them off before the whale ever needed to use its teeth. Norris had an idea. What if the whale's loudest clicks were not just for finding prey in the dark? What if they were also being used to disable it? Remember from earlier just how powerful these clicks actually are. A single blast measured at 230 decibels underwater, focused and aimed through that giant oil-filled head like a beam instead of a general sound wave. Norris proposed that at close range, this focused blast could be strong enough to physically stun a squid, scrambling its nervous system the same way a flashbang grenade disorients a person in a hallway, giving the whale a split-second advantage before the actual bite even happened. Scientists nicknamed this idea the Big Bang hypothesis, and it spread fast, showing up in documentaries, books, and articles for decades afterward. The image alone was irresistible. A living animal with a built-in sonic stun gun, hidden inside its skull, evolved specifically to make its prey defenseless before a single tooth ever made contact. It made sense on paper too. Water carries sound with far more physical force than air does. A pressure wave that would just be uncomfortably loud in air could genuinely rattle soft tissue underwater, especially at close range, especially aimed directly at a target with no protective shell or armor to absorb the impact. Divers who have been near clicking sperm whales back this up in their own way, describing a strange internal pressure sensation, something felt through the chest rather than heard through the ears, even from a reasonably safe distance away. If a human body notices something at that range, it is not hard to imagine a small, soft-bodied squid noticing a whole lot more. Norris was careful about how he presented the idea too, which often gets lost by the time an idea turns into a repeated internet fact. He and his co-author described it clearly as an unproven hypothesis, something worth testing, not something already proven. They gathered supportive clues, pointed out the gaps in their own reasoning, and openly invited other scientists to try to prove or disprove it. That careful, honest framing is exactly the part that tends to disappear once a cool idea starts spreading on its own. For years, this idea sat right on the edge between a fascinating guess and an accepted fact. Documentaries repeated it. People online repeated it even more. The mental image was simply too good not to spread. A real-life sonic weapon hiding inside one of the ocean's largest predators. But there is an important difference between an idea sounding believable and an idea actually being tested against real data. And when scientists finally got the tools to test the Big Bang hypothesis directly, instead of just guessing about it, the results did not go the way most people expected at all. Before scientists tested the idea directly, other researchers spent years trying to figure out just how strong a sound-based weapon like this would actually need to be, purely working from the physics involved. Sound underwater does not behave the way it does in air. Water is far denser, which means a pressure wave traveling through it carries far more force per square inch than the same wave would carry moving through open air. This is exactly why the earlier comparison worked. A whale click measured underwater, translating into something equivalent to standing directly in front of a cannon blast, if you tried to experience that same pressure level in air instead. At those pressure levels, some researchers calculated that a close-range blast could, in principle, be strong enough to cause real physical harm, rupturing delicate tissue, disrupting the nervous system of a small, soft-bodied animal with no bone or shell to protect its insides. On paper, a squid caught directly in the path of a full power click, at close range, seemed like it should have almost no chance at all. Early experiments even seemed to support the idea. Some tests exposing prey animals to loud recorded clicks reported changes in behavior, moments where fish or squid appeared to freeze or react strangely right after exposure. For a while, this looked like exactly the kind of support the idea needed. Other early tests told a messier story, though. A few experiments blasted squid with clicks as loud as anything a sperm whale could realistically produce, and recorded no clear reaction at all, no freezing, no visible sign of harm. Results kept coming back mixed, depending on the species of squid tested and exactly how the sound was delivered, which meant nobody could confidently call the idea proven, even after several attempts at testing it in a controlled setting. Picture a weapon that does not require touching its target at all. No bite, no physical contact whatsoever. Just aim, fire a wall of pressure through the water, and disable something before it even realizes an attack is happening. If true, this would put sperm whales in a very small, very exclusive category of animals capable of something close to a sonic weapon, built entirely out of their own biology. It is easy to see why this idea captured so much attention. It combined real, verified physics, the whale's genuinely record-breaking sound production, with a dramatic, almost science fiction sounding outcome. Every piece of it sounded internally consistent, mathematically plausible, and completely in line with everything else already known about how powerful these clicks really are. Popular science writers picked it up quickly too, and it is easy to see why. A built-in sonic weapon hidden inside one of the ocean's largest predators made for an irresistible headline. The kind of detail that spreads fast because it sounds almost too dramatic to be fiction. The problem with details that spread this fast is that the careful uncertainty attached to them at the very beginning tends to get left behind somewhere along the way. But sounding plausible on paper is very different from actually happening in the real ocean, with real squid, under real hunting conditions. Eventually, a team of researchers set out to settle the question directly, using the same recording tags that had already helped verify how deep these whales dive and how their hearts slow down during a hunt. What they found changed the entire conversation around this idea, and not in the direction most people expected. To actually test whether sperm whales use sound as a weapon, researchers needed something nobody had ever managed to get before: detailed data showing exactly how loud a whale's clicks were during the precise final seconds of a real hunt. Right at the moment teeth were about to close around prey, they got it using advanced tags, packed with microphones and motion sensors, attached directly to wild sperm whales before they dove. These tags recorded the whale's clicking pattern continuously, all the way down, through an entire hunting sequence, capturing the exact instant a chase turned into an attack. Right before a whale strikes, its clicking pattern shifts into something called a buzz, an extremely rapid burst of clicks packed close together, used for a final, high-resolution scan of the target right before contact. If the Big Bang hypothesis was correct, this buzz phase should have been the loudest, most powerful moment of the entire hunt, a final devastating blast meant to disable the prey before the bite. The data showed the exact opposite. During this final buzz phase, sperm whales actually reduced the strength of their clicks dramatically, dropping the sound intensity by a massive amount compared to their normal hunting clicks. Instead of a final devastating blast, the whale is doing something closer to switching from a searchlight to a precision magnifying glass, trading raw power for fine detail as it lines up the very last moment of the attack. Once researchers calculated the actual sound level reaching the prey during this weakened buzz phase, it came out far below anything that would be capable of causing physical harm or disorientation, simply too quiet to work as a weapon at all. One senior scientist involved in this area of research described the moment plainly, calling it a genuinely appealing idea that ended up getting killed by the data. And that is really what happened here. An idea that sounded completely believable, backed by real physics and a famous scientist's careful reasoning, still turned out to be wrong once someone actually went and checked. Other researchers ran a separate version of this same basic test too, playing clicks matching a sperm whale's most intense recorded output directly at squid and fish in controlled conditions, then watching closely for any sign of impaired swimming or physical damage. Across these separate attempts, the results kept lining up the same way. No stunning, no disabling. The prey simply kept swimming as if nothing unusual had happened at all, even when the sound levels used were close to the absolute maximum a whale is capable of producing. This does not make the original idea foolish or embarrassing. This is exactly how good science is supposed to work. A researcher notices something strange, proposes a testable explanation, and years later, better technology finally allows someone to check whether that explanation actually holds up under real conditions. Sometimes it does. This time, it did not. So if sound is not the secret weapon finishing these hunts after all, that raises a genuinely stranger question. because it turns out the whale's actual teeth might not be doing as much of the work as almost everyone assumes either. Here is something that sounds almost impossible. Scientists have found and studied adult sperm whales with badly deformed jaws, missing teeth, or lower jaws that grew crooked and twisted, completely unable to close normally against the upper jaw the way you would expect a predator's mouth to work. And these whales were not starving. Many of them were found to be healthy, well-fed adults, carrying normal amounts of body fat, clearly surviving just fine, despite a mouth that looked like it should make hunting nearly impossible. This genuinely confused researchers for a while. If a sperm whale's main weapon is biting down hard on squid with its teeth, how does an animal with a broken, unusable jaw manage to eat enough to survive at all, let alone stay healthy long term? The answer scientists have proposed involves something called suction feeding. Instead of chasing down squid and clamping its jaw shut around them, a sperm whale might rely far more on rapidly opening its mouth and throat, creating a powerful, sudden inward rush of water that pulls prey directly toward its mouth, almost like a vacuum. Teeth, in this version of the story, become far less important for actually catching the meal, and far more important for something else entirely, possibly fighting between males, or simply gripping something already mostly captured. This idea lines up with another strange detail about sperm whale anatomy too. In a lot of individuals, the upper jaw does not even grow functional, erupted teeth at all. Sockets are sometimes present, but actual visible teeth on top are often small, hidden beneath the gum line, or missing entirely. An animal famous for having some of the largest teeth of any predator on the planet frequently hunts using a mouth where only one side is doing the biting, and possibly not even doing most of the actual work. Orcas and dolphins, close relatives of the sperm whale, show hints of similar behavior too, sometimes using rapid suction to help pull smaller prey into their mouths, rather than relying purely on speed and teeth. Seeing this pattern show up across multiple related species makes the suction feeding idea harder to dismiss as just a strange one-off explanation for a handful of unlucky whales with damaged jaws. Think about that for a second. This is like discovering that a shark barely needs its rows of teeth to actually catch its meals in the first place, that the terrifying bite everyone pictures might mostly be for show, or for fighting other sharks, while the real hunting method is something else entirely, quieter and stranger than anyone originally assumed. Nothing here is fully settled science yet either. Researchers are still working out exactly how much of a sperm whale's diet comes from suction versus biting, and the answer likely depends on the size and type of prey involved in any given hunt. But the existence of healthy adult whales surviving with barely functional jaws is hard evidence that teeth alone cannot be the whole story. And teeth are not the only part of this whale's body doing something completely different than everyone assumes. Because what happens to all those swallowed squid parts the whale cannot actually chew tells an even stranger story, one that eventually leads straight back into that whale's gut. Whether a sperm whale is mostly biting or mostly sucking its prey in, one part of every single squid still ends up swallowed almost completely intact. That hard, curved beak, sitting at the center of the squid's body, the same tough material that eventually becomes ambergris, does not break down easily no matter how it gets into the whale's mouth in the first place. This means every single meal leaves behind a small, sharp, mostly indestructible object somewhere inside the whale's digestive system. One squid, one beak. Now multiply that by an animal eating potentially thousands of pounds of squid regularly for decades of its life. Most of the time, the whale's body handles this exactly the way it is supposed to. Beaks get separated from the digestible tissue and vomited back up before they ever cause a real problem. A built-in safety system for dealing with prey that is genuinely dangerous to swallow whole and leave inside. But this system is not perfect every single time. Sometimes beaks slip past that safety net, moving deeper into the digestive tract instead of coming back up. And once that happens, the whale's body is dealing with a genuinely dangerous foreign object, sharp enough to tear soft internal tissue if left completely unprotected. This is not a small design flaw either. Think about swallowing a mouthful of small, curved fish hooks every single time you ate a meal, then somehow needing your own body to safely process almost all of them without ever getting seriously hurt, week after week, for your entire life. One mistake, one hook that goes the wrong direction inside you, and you are dealing with real internal damage. Researchers studying sperm whale diet have leaned on this exact process for decades, actually using recovered beaks as a research tool rather than just a curiosity. Because each squid species has a slightly different shaped beak, scientists can sort through the leftovers found inside a whale's stomach and figure out almost exactly what that whale had been eating, sometimes identifying species that have never once been caught or photographed alive by anyone. In a strange way, a whale's stomach has become one of the only windows science has into some of the most mysterious animals living in the deep ocean. Scientists studying sperm whale stomachs, particularly ones from whales that died from natural causes or stranding, have found staggering numbers of these leftover beaks packed inside a single animal. In some documented cases, researchers pulled out beak counts reaching well into the thousands, all sitting inside one whale's digestive system at the same time. Picture opening someone's stomach and finding thousands of small, hard, pointed objects packed together in one place. Evidence of an entire lifetime of meals that the body simply could not fully process and discard. That is not a rare, unlucky case. For a whale eating this particular prey for years on end, this kind of build-up is closer to normal than exceptional. And this raises an obvious question. If thousands of sharp objects are sitting inside a whale's gut at once, how exactly does that whale's body manage to survive that without being torn apart from somewhere deep inside? The whale's own body has a clever answer to the beak problem, and it is the exact same answer already explained a few chapters ago, just seen from a different angle now. That thick, waxy coating the intestine produces, the one that eventually becomes ambergris, is not only there to protect the whale from beaks passing all the way through. In some cases, it forms specifically because so many beaks have accumulated in one place that the body needs a way to contain the entire growing mass safely, wrapping the whole dangerous cluster in a protective layer rather than dealing with each sharp piece one at a time. This means that giant, expensive, smelling lump some lucky beachcomber might find someday is not just a random blob. In a lot of cases, it is essentially a container built entirely out of the whale's own tissue, holding together potentially thousands of individual squid beaks that never manage to leave the whale's body any other way. Scientists cutting open recovered ambergris samples have found exactly this. Layer after layer of hardened waxy material with clusters of tiny beaks embedded throughout, sometimes so densely packed that a single chunk of ambergris looks less like a rock and more like a fossil bed if you looked closely enough at what was actually inside it. Think about that transformation one more time, but with this new detail added. What started as a genuine medical crisis inside a living animal, thousands of sharp objects that could not be expelled, eventually became one of the reasons that same substance turned into something perfume makers pay staggering amounts of money to get their hands on. The exact material protecting the whale from being torn apart on the inside is the same material that later gets sold for tens of thousands of dollars on a beach somewhere. There is a darker side to this story too. In the most extreme cases, when this waxy mass grows too large or gets positioned in the wrong place inside the whale's intestine, it can cause a complete blockage. Nothing can pass through anymore. This is not a minor stomachache for an animal this size. A full intestinal blockage in a sperm whale can become fatal, the whale's own defense mechanism eventually growing large enough to become the very thing that kills it. Researchers who have examined whales that died this way describe finding a single, enormous mass, sitting exactly where the intestine narrows, completely sealing off any further passage. In a strange, almost poetic way, the same natural process that can eventually create something as valuable as floating gold is also, on rare occasions, the direct cause of a whale's death. Survival tool and fatal flaw, built out of the exact same material, depending entirely on how large that mass is allowed to grow before the whale's body runs out of options. So this whale's body is capable of turning a genuine threat into something that protects it, most of the time. But not every dangerous object a sperm whale swallows over its lifetime comes from squid. Some of what ends up trapped inside these animals now comes from somewhere else entirely, and the story around that particular problem is nowhere near as strange or fascinating. It is simply tragic. Everything covered so far, the oil, the ambergris, the squid beaks, the collapsing rib cage, comes from millions of years of evolution, shaping this animal into exactly what it needs to be. Every strange feature has a purpose, a reason, a place in the natural story of how a sperm whale survives. What is about to be covered has no purpose at all, no evolutionary reason, no natural place in this animal's story. Over the past several decades, scientists performing necropsies on dead sperm whales, essentially an autopsy for an animal instead of a person, have started finding something showing up again and again that should never be there in the first place. Human garbage sitting inside the whale's stomach in disturbing quantities, plastic bags, fishing nets, rope, bottles, packaging material that still had readable labels on it, sitting inside an animal that spends almost its entire life far from any coastline, diving thousands of feet into open ocean most people will never even see. Here is the part that makes this so upsetting. This is not one unlucky whale that happened to swallow something strange by accident. Researchers around the world, examining stranded whales on completely different coastlines, separated by thousands of miles, keep finding disturbingly similar results. This is not a single, isolated incident. This has become something closer to a pattern. Nobody fully knows why a sperm whale would swallow plastic in the first place, since it obviously provides zero nutrition and cannot be properly digested. Some scientists believe certain floating plastic debris might resemble squid visually in low-light conditions, especially thin, drifting plastic bags that move through water in a way that could plausibly be mistaken for prey from a distance. Other researchers think some of it gets swallowed by accident, caught up alongside a genuine meal while the whale is focused on catching something real nearby. There is another explanation too, one connected directly to how deep-sea garbage actually behaves. Plastic breaking down in salt water often ends up coated in a thin biological film, tiny organisms, and algae that naturally grow across almost anything floating in the ocean long enough. That coating can carry a faint smell, similar to the small marine creatures a whale might normally hunt, meaning the plastic is not just visually confusing. In some cases, it may genuinely smell close enough to real food to fool an animal relying heavily on senses other than sight. Whatever the exact reason, the result inside the whale's body is the same either way: human trash. Sitting in a stomach built to handle sharp squid beaks and crushing water pressure, but never designed to process something that simply cannot break down at all, no matter how long it sits there. Fishing gear specifically shows up more often than almost anything else in these cases, and it makes sense once you think about how it ends up in the water in the first place. Nets and lines are not always dumped on purpose. Storms tear gear loose from boats. Old equipment gets abandoned or lost at sea and simply keeps drifting for years afterward, tangled and nearly invisible until something large enough to get caught in it happens to swim by. And once you start looking at the specific documented cases, the actual amounts of trash found inside individual whales, the scale of this problem becomes almost impossible to fully wrap your head around. In late 2019, on a beach on the Isle of Harris in Scotland, a young male sperm whale washed up dead. Researchers arrived to perform a necropsy, expecting to find whatever a typical sperm whale's stomach usually contains. What they actually found stopped them cold. Packed inside the whale's stomach was a single, dense, compacted ball of human garbage weighing around 220 pounds. To put that in perspective, that is heavier than most adult men, an entire mass of solid trash sitting inside one animal's digestive system, all compressed together into roughly the shape of a wrecking ball. Researchers who dissected it afterward described pulling apart layers of fishing net, tangled rope, plastic cups, shopping bags, work gloves, plastic packing straps, and lengths of rigid tubing, all packed so tightly together that some sections had to be cut apart just to identify what individual pieces actually were. One researcher on the team described the moment the whale was actually opened up as explosive, since decomposition gases had already built up significantly by the time they got to it. When they made the first cut, the pressure inside released so suddenly that a large amount of the whale's internal contents burst outward all at once. That detail matters more than it might seem right now. Keep it in mind, because gas buildup inside a dead whale's body is not a one-time coincidence tied to this particular case. It is a normal, predictable part of what happens after any large whale dies, and later in this video, that same basic process shows up again in a far more extreme, far more public way. Think about what this means for the whale's actual life leading up to its death. This was not a mass that appeared overnight. A blockage this size, this densely packed, almost certainly built up gradually, piece by piece, over a meaningful stretch of the whale's life, meaning this animal had likely been swallowing trash regularly for a significant period of time before it finally died. Once a mass like this reaches a certain size, there is no way for a whale's body to pass it naturally. It simply sits there, blocking the intestine completely, preventing anything else from moving through normally. Nutrients cannot be absorbed the way they should be. Waste cannot properly exit the body either. The whale is essentially being slowly, silently starved from the inside, all while carrying a literal ball of human garbage weighing more than most adult humans. Scottish researchers who examined the case called the discovery shameful, and it is hard to argue with that description once you actually picture it clearly. An entire wild animal, one that spends its life diving over a mile down into darkness humans can barely comprehend, ultimately killed by something as mundane and preventable as packing straps and plastic shopping bags. Sadly, this whale was far from an isolated case. Around the same general period, researchers on completely different coastlines were opening up other dead sperm whales and finding disturbingly similar results, sometimes even worse, proving this was not one unlucky animal in one unlucky location, and this was not even close to the most trash ever recorded inside a single sperm whale. In early 2018, a young male sperm whale washed up dead on a beach near Murcia, Spain. Local authorities brought the whale in for a full necropsy, hoping to determine exactly what had killed it. They did not have to search very hard. Inside the whale's stomach and intestines, investigators discovered nearly 65 pounds of plastic waste and debris, an amount that fills roughly the same space as a small bathtub packed completely full. Dozens of plastic bags, tangled chunks of rope, broken glass, a large plastic container, bundles of raffia sacking, a rough woven material sometimes used for farming and packaging. This was not scattered trash the whale happened to swallow here and there over time. This was compacted, jammed material, sitting together in a mass dense enough to physically block the whale's digestive system from functioning at all. Local officials released photos from the necropsy showing the full pile of recovered debris laid out on the ground beside the whale, and the sheer volume genuinely shocked people who saw it. It did not look like the contents of one animal's stomach. It looked more like the aftermath of someone dumping an entire trash bag directly into the ocean. Investigators determined this blockage was almost certainly the direct cause of death. The whale's digestive system had essentially shut down, unable to process food normally or pass waste, likely leading to a slow, painful decline before it eventually died and washed ashore. Photos of the recovered debris quickly spread far beyond the local area, showing up in news coverage around the world. Some of the images that circulated online during this period actually turned out to be from an unrelated art installation, not the real necropsy, which caused some confusion at the time. But fact-checkers verified the core story was completely real, backed by official photos and statements directly from the researchers who performed the actual examination. Regional officials in the area used this specific whale's story to launch a public awareness campaign about ocean plastic, organizing beach cleanups and public talks across the region. A single animal's death becoming the direct reason an entire region changed how it talked about plastic pollution says a lot about just how disturbing this particular case actually was. Here is something worth sitting with for a second. A sperm whale spends most of its life diving deep into open ocean, thousands of feet from any coastline, hunting animals that live in near total darkness. This is about as far from human civilization as a living creature can physically get on this planet. And it still ended up with a bathtub's worth of human trash packed inside its body. There is no coastline this animal was avoiding carefully enough, no amount of distance from land that could fully protect it. Human garbage had already reached this whale's world long before the whale itself ever had a choice in the matter. And this would tragically not be the last time investigators found a story exactly like this one. Cases like this one keep appearing on coastlines that have nothing else in common with each other. Different countries, different climates, different local fishing industries, which rules out any single simple explanation like one careless ship or one nearby dump site. The trash finding its way into these animals is coming from everywhere at once, carried by currents that treat national borders as if they do not exist at all. In the spring of 2019, a pregnant sperm whale washed up dead on a beach near Porto Cervo, a coastal town on the Italian island of Sardinia. Local wildlife responders and veterinarians arrived to examine her, and what they found inside her body became one of the most widely shared, most heartbreaking ocean pollution stories of that entire year. When the team opened her stomach, they found nearly 50 pounds of plastic waste crammed inside, filling more than 2/3 of the available space. Shopping bags, fishing line, a section of corrugated tubing used in electrical work, a container of laundry detergent, its brand label and barcode still fully readable, as if it had been thrown away only days earlier, instead of sitting inside a wild animal's stomach. And inside her womb, alongside all of that trash, was her unborn calf, already dead. Researchers determined the calf had likely died before the mother herself did, its body already showing signs of decomposition by the time the necropsy took place. A biologist working on the case told reporters this was the first time her team had ever encountered an animal carrying this much garbage inside it, a statement that carries real weight coming from someone who studies marine animals professionally. The whale herself measured around 26 feet long, and her body had to be lifted onto a truck using heavy equipment before being transported to a research facility on the mainland for the full examination. Even before the necropsy began, veterinarians on the scene could already tell something was seriously wrong just from her external condition, which is part of why the team moved quickly to determine the exact cause once she arrived. Think about what this actually means. This was not one whale making one unfortunate mistake. This was a mother, likely swallowing plastic gradually over a long stretch of time, her body slowly losing the ability to properly digest real food as more and more waste built up inside her. And her calf, still developing, still depending entirely on her body for everything it needed, never even got the chance to be born into an ocean that was already failing it before it took a single breath. This particular case sparked serious public attention across Italy. Government officials spoke publicly about it, calling for stronger action on ocean plastic pollution, specifically because of how this story affected people once they actually understood the full details. It is one thing to hear a general statistic about how much plastic ends up in the ocean each year. It is something else entirely to picture a specific mother and her unborn baby, both lost the same way, inside the same stomach, the exact same week. This is not a rare, isolated tragedy either. It is simply one of the more publicly documented examples of something happening to marine animals around the world on a regular basis, largely unnoticed, far from any camera or research team. But plastic is not the only thing that eventually breaks a sperm whale's body down from the inside. Sometimes, the danger comes from something the whale's own body creates entirely on its own, after it has already died. When most animals die in the ocean, their bodies eventually get consumed, broken down, and recycled back into the ecosystem. A sperm whale carcass, however, does not simply fade away quietly. An animal this massive, sometimes weighing more than 50 tons, creates a genuinely strange and sometimes dangerous situation the moment it dies. If a whale dies far out at sea and sinks to the bottom, something scientists call a whale fall happens. The body becomes an entire miniature ecosystem, feeding scavengers, worms, and bacteria for years, sometimes decades, in an area of the ocean floor that otherwise has almost no food source at all. It is actually one of the more beautiful natural processes connected to a whale's death, an entire community of deep-sea life growing directly out of one animal's final gift to the ocean floor. But not every whale dies out in open water. Sometimes a whale strands itself, or washes up already dead, directly onto a beach, sitting exposed to open air instead of sinking into the cold, oxygen-poor depths where decomposition happens slowly. This changes everything about what happens next. When a whale sinks and settles onto the ocean floor at extreme depth, the water there is close to freezing, and oxygen levels are far lower than near the surface. Both of those conditions slow bacterial activity down considerably, which is part of why a whale fall can support scavengers gradually feeding on the same carcass for years without the body ever building dangerous internal pressure. Cold and low oxygen essentially put decomposition into a kind of slow motion. On land, none of those protections exist. Decomposition speeds up dramatically. Warmer temperatures, more oxygen available for bacteria to feed on, a massive body packed with organs, blood, and tissue, all beginning to break down at once, far faster than anyone standing nearby would probably want to think about. And a body this size decomposing rapidly does not just smell terrible, it becomes something closer to a pressurized container, quietly building toward a problem that most people watching from a safe distance would never expect to actually happen. Bacteria feeding on the whale's internal organs produce enormous amounts of gas as a natural byproduct of that decomposition process, primarily methane and hydrogen sulfide. In a smaller animal, this gas would simply seep out gradually through natural openings in the body, causing no real danger at all. But inside something the size of a school bus, with thick blubber and skin acting almost like a container wall, that gas has nowhere easy to escape. Pressure starts building. Slowly, invisibly, entirely out of sight, somewhere deep inside a body that already looks disturbing enough sitting motionless on a beach. Researchers who handle beached whale carcasses for a living know exactly what this means, and it changes how they approach the entire process. Necropsies on large, already decomposing whales are treated with real caution, sometimes involving special equipment specifically because everyone on the team understands the body in front of them is not simply a large, dead animal. It is closer to a sealed container with an unknown amount of pressure trapped inside it, one that needs to be handled carefully to avoid a genuinely dangerous release. And in at least one well-documented case, that pressure did not stay contained for long. In January of 2004, a massive sperm whale, measuring around 56 feet long and weighing close to 60 tons, died and washed ashore on a beach in Yunlin County, Taiwan. Researchers wanted to study the carcass, so plans were made to transport the entire whale by truck to a university nearby for a full examination. Moving a whale this size was not simple. It reportedly took over 13 hours, 3 large cranes, and around 50 workers just to get the body loaded safely onto a flatbed trailer truck for the trip. By the time that truck finally started rolling through the streets of Tainan City, more than a full day had already passed since the whale had died. Decomposition, and the gas buildup that comes with it, had been quietly working the entire time. Then, in the middle of a busy street, surrounded by cars, shops, and pedestrians going about a completely normal day, the whale exploded. Witnesses described a sudden, violent burst, the whale's abdomen bursting open and spraying blood, organs, and decomposing tissue across the street. Nearby vehicles and storefronts. People wore masks in the aftermath just to handle the smell while cleaning up. Traffic in the area stopped completely for hours while crews worked to clear the scene. Nobody standing nearby was seriously hurt, which honestly feels like pure luck once you picture the actual scale of what happened. A 60-ton animal releasing built-up decomposition gas and organic material all at once directly into a crowded public street could have gone very differently for anyone standing too close at the wrong moment. One expert who studied the event afterward explained that a whale of this size can generate enough internal heat and gas pressure during decomposition to expand the carcass far beyond its normal dimensions, essentially turning it into exactly what it looked like from the outside: a ticking biological time bomb sitting on the back of a truck, slowly counting down while stuck in traffic through a busy downtown street. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, and it eventually became one of the more well-known examples of exactly this phenomenon happening anywhere in the world. Reporters described the scene as something closer to a horror movie than a research transport gone slightly wrong, and it is easy to understand why once you actually picture blood and organs spraying across a public street in broad daylight, this was not some rare, physics-defying event either. This was simply what happens when a massive amount of trapped decomposition gas, building steadily inside a sealed, decaying body for over a day, finally finds a weak point to escape through all at once. In this case, that weak point happened to give way in the middle of a busy city, instead of quietly on an empty beach where almost nobody would have noticed at all. The researchers involved eventually did get to perform their examination, salvaging what they could from the whale's remains afterward. But the incident itself became far more famous than any of the actual scientific findings that came out of it. Whaling crews from long before this event already understood something about what happens when you cut open a whale, though. And some of what they found inside these animals turned out to be almost as strange as the explosion itself. For hundreds of years, sperm whales were hunted relentlessly, mainly for that oil-filled head described back at the start of this video, along with the ambergris. Some of them carried entire fleets of ships, spent months, sometimes years, at sea, chasing these animals across every ocean on the planet. And whalers cutting into these animals kept finding something strange, something that had nothing to do with what they were actually searching for. Old iron, broken harpoon tips, buried deep inside, a freshly caught whale's blubber or muscle, completely healed over, sometimes rusted, and clearly decades old by the time a new crew discovered them. This meant something specific, something whalers at the time understood immediately, even without modern science to back it up. This particular whale had survived a previous hunt, sometimes an attack from a completely different ship, possibly years or even decades earlier, carrying the broken remains of that failed attempt inside its own body the entire time, healed over and functioning normally, right up until the moment a different crew finally succeeded. Think about what that actually means for the whale itself. An animal struck and wounded by humans at some point in its life, somehow escaping, healing around a piece of metal still lodged inside it, and continuing to survive, dive, hunt, and live completely normally for years afterward, all while carrying a literal weapon fragment as a permanent passenger inside its own flesh. This was not treated as some rare curiosity buried deep in old records either. Sailors wrote about finding old irons often enough that it became a recognized, somewhat expected part of the job, direct proof that these animals could survive encounters that should have killed them, then simply keep going. Whaling ships from different countries, different companies, and different decades often marked their harpoons in slightly different ways, meaning an experienced whaling crew could sometimes look at a recovered fragment and make an educated guess about roughly when, and even where, that original hunt might have taken place. In a strange way, these buried metal fragments worked almost like a rough timestamp, a small piece of manufacturing history sitting inside a living animal, completely unrelated to anything the whale itself had done. This also meant something uncomfortable for the industry itself, whether whalers at the time fully processed it that way or not. Every old iron pulled from a newly caught whale was physical proof of a previous attempt that had failed, an earlier hunt where the whale escaped, wounded but alive, only to eventually be caught again by an entirely different crew years down the line. The ocean was smaller, and whaling routes more repetitive than people sometimes assume. Modern scientists studying old whaling logs alongside these recovered fragments have used them to trace individual whale populations across decades, following migration routes that were previously only guessed at. What started as a strange curiosity found by working sailors eventually became a genuine research tool, connecting scattered historical records into something closer to a coherent picture of how these animals actually moved across entire oceans, long before satellite tracking made that kind of study possible. Just how long can a whale actually carry evidence like this? The most extreme documented example known to science actually comes from a close relative, and it is worth knowing anyway, because it shows exactly how long a whale's body can hold onto physical proof of a wound from a completely different era of human history entirely. In 2007, indigenous whalers in Alaska caught a massive whale during a traditional hunt, one that provides food for their community the same way it has for generations. As the animal was being processed, someone noticed something unusual embedded deep in its shoulder, near the neck. A rusted, corroded piece of metal, clearly manufactured, clearly not part of the whale's own body. This particular whale was a bowhead, a close cousin of the sperm whale, not a sperm whale itself. But the discovery matters here anyway, because it reveals exactly how long evidence of an old wound can realistically survive inside a whale's body. And sperm whales are built from the same basic biological toolkit. Researchers sent the fragment to a whaling historian, someone who specializes in identifying old weapon technology from the commercial whaling era. After careful study, he identified it as part of an exploding harpoon design, a bomb lance, patented and manufactured in the late 1800s, used heavily by crews sailing out of a major American whaling port during that period. Based on when that specific design was actually in use, researchers estimated the whale had originally been struck by this weapon sometime between 1,885 and 1,895. That means this whale survived an attack over a full century before it was finally caught for good, carrying a fragment of 19th century weaponry embedded inside its own body the entire time, healing completely around it and continuing to live completely normally for well over 100 years afterward. The historian involved described just how rare it is to get a chance to date a whale this precisely, since most age estimates for these animals rely on far less direct methods, like analyzing chemical changes inside the lens of a whale's eye over its lifetime. A weapon fragment with a known manufacturing window turned this particular whale into something close to a walking historical record, a level of precision researchers almost never get to work with. Sit with that timeline for a second. The whale that eventually died in 2007 had been alive, swimming, feeding, and healing around this exact piece of metal since roughly the same era. Horse-drawn carriages were still common, and the phonograph had only just been invented. This case became one of the clearest, most convincing pieces of evidence supporting something scientists already suspected about certain long-living whale species: that some individuals can potentially survive well beyond a century, possibly reaching close to 200 years old in rare cases, making them some of the longest-living mammals known to exist anywhere on the planet. Sperm whales themselves are not thought to live quite that long, with most estimates suggesting a natural lifespan somewhere around 60 to 70 years, occasionally longer. But the underlying lesson from this bowhead whale's story still applies directly to them. A body capable of healing completely around a piece of embedded metal, sealing it away safely for potentially decades at a time, is exactly the kind of resilience already seen throughout this entire video. Whether it is surviving crushing dive pressure, healing over massive squid battle scars, or in this closely related species, quietly carrying a piece of human history buried inside its own flesh for over 100 years. Inside that massive oil-filled head, sits something that outranks every other animal on the planet in one specific, remarkable category. The sperm whale has the largest brain of any animal known to science, living or extinct, as far as researchers have ever measured. An adult sperm whale's brain weighs somewhere between 18 and 20 pounds. For comparison, an average human brain weighs around 3 pounds. Do the math on that difference, and you get a brain roughly 5 to 6 times heavier than yours, sitting inside a single animal's skull. Picture holding a bowling ball. Now imagine a brain that weighs noticeably more than that, packed with billions of neurons, sitting behind that same wall of spermaceti oil already covered earlier in this video. Most people picture a bowling ball as something heavy and awkward to hold with one hand. A sperm whale carries something heavier than that inside its head as a permanent, everyday feature of its own body. Even blue whales, the largest animals to have ever existed on Earth, do not come close to this. Despite weighing many times more than a sperm whale overall, a blue whale's brain stays noticeably smaller, nowhere near the sperm whale's record-breaking weight. Elephants, often used as the classic example of a large-brained land animal, do not come close either. An African elephant's brain weighs somewhere around 11 pounds, genuinely massive by land animal standards, and still notably lighter than a sperm whale's. Scientists ranking animals by raw brain weight consistently place the sperm whale at the very top of that entire list, ahead of every other creature ever properly measured, whether that animal lives today or only exists now as fossil remains. Brain size alone does not automatically equal intelligence, though, and scientists are careful about that distinction. A bigger brain does not mean bigger thoughts in any simple, direct way. What actually matters more is the ratio between brain size and body size, along with the internal structure and complexity of that brain, not simply the raw number on a scale. Even accounting for that, a sperm whale's brain remains genuinely impressive by any measure scientists use. Its neocortex, the region generally associated with complex thought, sensory processing, and problem-solving in mammals, is highly developed, showing significant folding and structure similar to features seen in some of the most intelligent animals studied so far. This organ evolved for a reason too, even if scientists are still working out the exact full picture. Processing that constant stream of echolocation data described earlier, building a complete three-dimensional map of pitch-black water using nothing but returning sound waves, takes an enormous amount of computing power. So does coordinating complex social behavior, remembering individual pod members, and managing the kind of cooperative babysitting system described several chapters back. An animal capable of surviving crushing ocean pressure, healing over massive squid battle scars, and building a substance worth more than gold out of its own digestive waste is also, quite literally, carrying around the single largest thinking organ that has ever existed inside any creature on this entire planet. And that raises one final, genuinely unresolved question. What exactly is all of that brain power actually being used for? A brain this massive costs an enormous amount of energy just to keep running. Brain tissue burns through oxygen and nutrients constantly, even when an animal is resting, which means evolution does not build an organ this expensive without a genuinely strong reason behind it. So, what is a sperm whale actually doing with all of that extra processing power? Part of the answer almost certainly connects back to everything already covered in this video, building a complete picture of pitch-black water using nothing but echolocation, tracking prey, avoiding obstacles, and remembering the general layout of a hunting ground takes serious computing power, updated constantly, click by click, throughout an hour-long dive. But research over the past several years has pointed towards something else too, something that goes beyond simple hunting and navigation. Scientists studying recorded click patterns, specifically short, rhythmic sequences called codas, have found something surprising. These codas are not random. They follow identifiable patterns, sometimes changing slightly based on context, almost like different dialects used by different whale communities living in different parts of the ocean. Certain research teams working specifically on decoding these patterns have identified structural features inside these click sequences that share some basic similarities with elements of human language. Things like combining smaller building blocks in different arrangements to potentially create different meanings. To be clear, nobody is claiming sperm whales are having full conversations the way humans do, discussing complex ideas back and forth in real sentences. That would be a significant overstatement of what has actually been proven so far. What researchers have found is real structure, real complexity, and real regional variation in how different whale communities communicate, discoveries that are still being actively studied and expanded on right now. Pods also appear to pass down specific coda patterns across generations, almost like cultural traditions, distinct dialects that stay consistent within a particular family group over time, sometimes even used partly to help identify which extended family or clan a specific whale actually belongs to. Researchers working on this exact problem have started using powerful computer analysis, similar in some ways to tools used for studying human language patterns, to search for hidden structure buried inside thousands of hours of recorded whale clicks. Early results have already revealed combinations and sequences more complex than scientists originally expected, hinting that there may be far more organized information packed into these sounds than anyone assumed even a decade ago. Whether that structure ever qualifies as language in the full human sense remains an open, actively debated question. Think about an animal capable of surviving crushing depth, capable of building a substance worth a fortune out of its own gut, potentially also capable of something resembling regional dialects and multi-generational cultural transmission, all running through the same organ, roughly the size and weight of a bowling ball, sitting behind a wall of strange oil most of humanity has never even thought twice about. This is genuinely one of the more exciting areas of ongoing research into these animals right now, and it is a perfect example of exactly how much about this creature still remains unanswered, even after everything already covered across this entire video. Think back over everything covered across this entire video. A 500-pound tank of oil, still not fully understood after centuries of study, a sound weapon idea that took decades to properly test and even longer to properly disprove, scars from fights that have never once been captured on camera, despite everything modern technology can throw at the problem, a brain potentially capable of something resembling language, still being actively decoded right now, in real time, by researchers working through massive amounts of recorded data. This is not some rare, unusually mysterious animal buried in some forgotten corner of scientific research either. The sperm whale is one of the most heavily studied large animals in the entire ocean, hunted by humans for centuries, tracked by modern researchers using satellite tags, drones, and underwater microphones scattered across every major ocean basin on the planet. And even with all of that effort, all of that attention, this animal still keeps secrets. Consider how much of this entire video relied on evidence found after the fact. Scars instead of footage, stomach contents instead of witnessed hunts, recorded clicks instead of a full, translated conversation. Almost everything genuinely dramatic about how this animal actually lives happens somewhere humans still cannot easily follow, thousands of feet down, in complete darkness, under pressure that would crush most equipment built to observe it. Scientists estimate that a significant portion of the deep ocean, the exact environment a sperm whale spends much of its life hunting in, remains completely unexplored by humans. Even now, entire species living down there have never been observed alive. Entire behaviors connected to animals like the sperm whale are still being pieced together, one small discovery at a time, sometimes decades apart. New tagging technology keeps changing what researchers thought they already understood too. Every time a slightly smaller, slightly more advanced camera tag gets developed, teams attach it to a wild whale and immediately start seeing behavior nobody had properly documented before. Dive patterns, social interactions, or hunting techniques that simply were not visible using older equipment. In a lot of ways, understanding of this animal is advancing directly alongside whatever technology happens to exist at that specific moment, which means there is a real chance a significant amount of what counts as accepted knowledge about sperm whales today will look noticeably incomplete again within another decade. This is genuinely rare in modern science. Most large, well-known animals on land have been observed extensively, filmed constantly, and studied down to fairly precise detail. A sperm whale, despite being one of the largest predators alive today, still regularly surprises the exact researchers who have spent entire careers studying it. That gap between how much attention this animal receives and how little of its actual life humans have directly witnessed is exactly what makes it genuinely fascinating. The environment itself, dark, crushing, and almost entirely hidden from view, continues to protect its secrets far better than almost anywhere else on the planet, no matter how much scientific attention gets pointed at it. Go back to the very beginning of this video for a second. A creature bigger than a school bus, floating completely still in the dark, almost dead on purpose. That image alone was strange enough to pull you in, but now you actually know what was hiding underneath it. A 500-pound tank of oil, still not fully explained. A sound so loud it could, in principle, stun smaller animals nearby. An idea scientists chased for decades before finally proving it was not quite true after all. A digestive waste product so valuable that people have built entire treasure hunting habits around finding it washed up on a beach. Circular scars, some wider than a dinner plate, left behind by fights nobody alive has ever actually witnessed from start to finish. A body built to collapse on purpose, over a mile beneath the surface, deeper than most machines humans have ever built could survive. A heart that nearly stops itself, on command, every single time this animal decides to hunt. Teeth that might not even be the real weapon at all. A stomach capable of holding thousands of sharp, leftover parts at once, sometimes swapped out entirely for human garbage instead. Tragedy replacing nature in some of the saddest documented cases in modern marine science. A body that, after death, does not just quietly disappear, sometimes releasing everything it built up in one violent, unforgettable moment. And a brain, the single largest thinking organ that has ever existed inside any creature on this planet, potentially capable of something resembling its own regional dialects, still being decoded by scientists right now, in real time, while you watch this. This is what was hiding inside an animal most people only picture as a giant grey shape gliding calmly through a nature documentary. Nothing about it is calm once you actually look closely. Every single detail covered in this video came from real research, real necropsies, real recordings pulled from actual dives, and real events that genuinely happened on actual beaches and city streets around the world. None of it needed exaggeration. The real biology, the real history, and the real documented cases were already disturbing enough entirely on their own, which honestly might be the most unsettling part of this whole story. Nothing here was made up to grab your attention. It was simply sitting there, hidden, waiting for someone to actually go looking. If this kept you watching until the very end, that alone tells you everything you need to know about how much stranger the ocean actually is compared to what most people assume. Subscribe if you want more of this, because animals like this one are not rare exceptions. They are proof of exactly how much is still sitting undiscovered beneath the surface, waiting for someone to actually go looking. There are other animals out there carrying secrets just as strange as this one, and this channel exists specifically to keep finding them. The sperm whale was never just a big, gentle giant swimming quietly through blue water. It was always something else entirely, and now you actually know what.